Questions about Hepburn Wind at the Q&A time. Really happy to talk from Hepburn Wind. Also happy to talk from the Coalition for Community Energy perspective, which was it's a sort of network that we set up, a national network, so that we can all collaborate better because we're all quite under-resourced. And I should say that ATA is a very key component in that. ATA was one of the founding members of the Coalition for Community Energy as well. But yes, thank you for all coming. I have made some assumptions about tonight. I have assumed that largely all of you live in the urban settings. I know that Peter lives down near Anglesey, but apart from that, I have made an assumption that in general you live in the sort of city or suburbs. So I've tried to skew my presentation to make it relevant for you guys in your local communities. So the really exciting thing happening at the moment is that there's a bunch of policy reform happening in the Victorian space. So when our little wind farm was built had started generating in 2011, we were so positive. We were like, look what we've done. Now everyone's going to do stuff similar, and it's all sort of kicking off. I think 2 months after generation, the state government passed the strictest wind regulations in the world. We then, moved on to having a federal government that really tried to actively disable the renewable energy sector and did a very, very, very good job. But we're now in the context. You're right. Hi. No, you're right. We're now in a very exciting environment. Hopefully, a lot of these recommendations can be legislated, so they can't be sort of impacted for years to come. And if the politics changes, in the forthcoming elections. But some of the policy reform that's happening that is really going to help community groups build their own renewable energy projects is the Victorian Climate Change Act review is underway, has been completed, and we're waiting on the further recommendations. There was a review into the Essential Services Commission's role in how they give exemptions for small-scale generators to essentially sell electricity. So that's happened, which means small-scale solar is a whole lot more possible in the Victorian context. There's currently a discussion paper open at the moment around our planning regulations and what that means for community wind, and also what the rates should be for small-scale energy generators. The government has already supported Newstead and the Macedon Ranges to do some sort of solar-based projects. We authored the Guide for Community-Owned Renewable Energy for Victorian Communities late last year and did 10 workshops across the state, and we had about 400 people attend, which was fantastic. New Energy Jobs Fund from the state government has already accepted, I think, 22 community projects. They haven't done a public announcement yet, but it's looking like it's going to be 22, which is very exciting. There's option submissions, there's a parliamentary inquiry into community energy, and our good friends at Friends of the Earth are doing a campaign at the moment, which is a sort of action that would be good to circulate on your list, because sort of individuals can participate in some of these processes rather than just organisations. So when we talk about community energy, we're essentially talking, there's already been so much good work happening with the residential solar space. That space is now getting really, really exciting because we're starting to see batteries and other technologies coming in. And then we've also got the large-scale utility-sized wind farms and solar farms. But the community energy space is really the one in between that we're talking about. And that's where, it could look like 2 wind turbines, it could look like a 2 megawatt solar farm or a 100 kilowatt solar farm. It could also look like a portion of a bigger development. So, maybe there's 10 turbines, the community's put in enough money to own, essentially 1 turbine, so a percentage of it. And it's really about community participation in energy. So, although the megawatts might not stack up and look really big if you do the maths, what community energy can bring is basically the social license for, the broader rollout of renewables across the state. So if we are looking down, the track of 40% renewable energy by 2025. There's going to be a lot of wind farms, a lot of solar farms that have to be built to meet that. What I want to see is a lot of community energy projects as well, because that will help people to be engaged, for them to accept the transition that we're about to see, because there is going to be, a lot of it. The whole energy market's going to be decentralised in ways we've never imagined before. The Trove is not going to be the focus. There's going to be projects all over the state. So having happy communities that are participating, that are educated about it, that are wanting to, be involved, that's the role of community energy. And every project is going to be different. The urban spaces compared to, where I live in central Victoria, they're very, very different contexts. We've got resource abundance in central Victoria. We can put wind, solar, bioenergy, some micro hydro out there. In the urban spaces, people can do lots of community solar. You've got lots of access to host sites. You can do lots of work with residential solar as well. Some of the legal models, again, are really, they just chop and change depending on what the context is for different operating environments. So for our community, we really wanted the democratic principles of one member, one vote. So we chose a co-op. But generally the motivations, the values and the benefits stay the same. So it's about climate change, it's about community empowerment. In regards to climate change, it's around strengthening your community, giving it something to mobilise around, regional development and diversification of local income streams. So although we're a pretty slow mover, across the globe, it is a really mainstream model in many, many countries. So Denmark was definitely the first mover. Right from the start of the 80s, they were doing community-owned wind farms. There's 2,000 community-owned turbines in Denmark still currently. So there's the community-owned wind supplies 3.5% of the national electricity. There's a lot of community-owned solar going on. In Germany, so I believe it's 46% of the entire renewable energy capacity is owned by individuals and communities. This includes municipalities as well and local water authorities. So that's why that number starts to look really big. Over 200,000 people own shares in wind farms. In Scotland, they had a very supportive policy environment in regards to helping communities get through the high risk stage before they built projects. So they had a kind of no interest fund that you could bid into to get through your planning phase. If your project got up, you had to pay back that money. If it didn't get up, that loan was waived, and that delivered 300 projects in 10 years. So they went from 3 projects to 300 in just 10 years. So if we're starting to look at, in Victoria, heading towards 2025, there's a 40% renewable energy target. Those sorts of numbers should be really possible for our state. So how are we already doing the energy bit in Victoria? So I really love the MASH program up in Castlemaine. So it's a bulk buy solar program. They've already delivered 1.7 megawatts across the Goldfields area. Program's really simple. Once they have 100 people signing up to put residential solar on their homes, they donate a solar array to a community facility. So they've put, sort of 5 kilowatt systems on schools and various other facilities. So they're into MASH 3 at the moment. The ATA has been helping them out a little bit with that, and they're doing it's a battery and solar bulk buy system. Obviously Hepburn Wind, we're 4.1 megawatts, 2,000 members, $10 million invested. We've been generating now for 5.5 years. We're also seeing this real movement for councils becoming to pull their weight and sort of setting strong 100% renewable targets. So Lismore City Council is a really good example of that. And they're partnering with the community to deliver that. So they've got 2 community-owned 100 kilowatt solar systems on their wastewater treatment facility as well as their sports centre. And we're also seeing sustainability groups leading the way. And again, there's this real push, especially in the regional areas, to set 100% renewable energy targets. And then, definitely the sort of mixture of technologies is so completely different in all the in all the areas. So what totally renewable Yapping will be able to do is so completely different to what would happen in Dalesford or happen in Castlemaine. But still, they're setting these targets and they're working out pathways to deliver them. So some of the operating models in the space, and I'll go into a couple of the community solar ones in more detail, are that we're seeing a lot of the donation and philanthropic kind of community solar projects. So that's Karina, the People's Solar, they're all doing a lot of those. And generally it's quite small scale, maybe between 3 and 20 kilowatts on site of community facilities. We're also seeing behind the meter community investment with solar, so that's the Repower Shoalhaven. Generally these projects are just sub 100 kilowatts, so they're normally 99 kilowatts or 98 kilowatts, so that they are within the small renewable energy certificate market. The multi-household bulk buy, as I mentioned before, the MASH program and the community council partnerships. With wind, we've got 2 projects up. So one is Hepburn Wind, that's a cooperative, and the second one was Denmark Community Wind in Western Australia, and that's a company structure with 160 investors, 2 turbines, 1.6 megawatt total capacity. And we're seeing community developer partnerships happen as well in the space, which is really exciting. Bioenergy and hydro is still under development. Hepburn Wind's working on a micro hydro sort of refurbishment project for a small unit that's at Lake Dalesford. Warburton Micro Hydro is another community scale project. There's a bioenergy project in Cowra, which is a combination of the local council, a bunch of farmers that used to farm beetroot and other items that used to be canned, and the canning facility isn't there anymore, so they need to find out what to do with their sort of harvest that they're generating still every year. So bioenergy is a good option for them, and that project looks to be between 1 megawatt and 12 megawatts when it's completed. So some of the fun things about highly engaged communities, which I'm sure you would find from sharing time with your ATA people, or if you're involved in any of the more sort of activist spaces, is that there's this real empowerment that happens when people feel like they get to participate in actively trying to do good things for the climate. The beauty about community energy is that it really does deliver regional economic benefits. I think with Hepburn Wind, we're a very good example of that. We had a local purchasing policy where $7 million local content out of a $13 million project. Everyone from the local concreter to the local graphic designer all has participated in our project, and we have a really sophisticated benefit sharing model as well, which shares the benefits. Also, as I mentioned before, that sort of theme around acting as the gatekeeper for the broader rollout of renewables, so accelerating the renewable industry development and impact is really important. So if we are all participating in our own smaller projects, it means that there's just more literacy and more awareness more broadly, and more news stories around this journey that we are all going to be forced to participate in towards a clean energy future. There's also the tapping of a new funding source, so the community investor. With the Lismore Community Solar Project, it was 2 99 kilowatt solar arrays that were due to be delivered. They opened up for investment, and within 10 days they were sold out, so it was $160,000 for each project. They only needed 20 investors, and they were capped at 20 investors for each project, and as I said, within 10 days they were both sold out, and they've had to make a spreadsheet and share it with other projects that are looking for investors. So there's definitely the desire there, and it's more about how do we sort of mobilise these projects and make them accessible. For some of the bigger projects, especially when you think about sort of community wind or community developer partnerships in the wind space, it can definitely smooth the approvals process and make the community, the community feels that they've got a say, they've got choice, they're participating, they've got ownership of the project. So I really advocate for some of the bigger developers to start to think about, how to bring in community investment within their projects. This is definitely something that's worked in Denmark. In Denmark, there's a legislative policy around a minimum of 20% of any development must be opened up for 4 months for community investment. And if the community decides to take it up, they can, and if they don't, other financing is sought. And to date, they haven't had any that haven't filled up within that time period. And it's only for within a 5 kilometre radius, I believe, for 4.5 to 5 kilometre radius. So it's a bit difficult to see, but when thinking about some of the project ideas, lots of them don't work. We've got a really narrow operating environment. So, something that we really advocate for is trying to find out what's feasible, viable and desirable. In an urban setting, you've got less choices, as I said, less mixture of technology choices, so your focus will often be more about probably community solar or residential solar or batteries. So I just wanted to touch on some of the community solar models quickly, and also let you know on, a big part of what Embark tries to do is make intellectual property free for people to access. So we have a whole bunch of resources around small scale solar on the wiki, including a small scale decision tree, how you can work with a host to identify if they're suitable to have a community solar facility on their roof, and just generic information around what is behind the meter solar. That's just a little graphic of the decision tree. So donation-based solar I mentioned earlier. So one of the big movers in this space is Karina. They're based out of South Australia, but they're national. I believe they've got 6 projects up now, might be up to 8. But essentially they work with the local community to crowdsource enough money to put a solar array on top of the community building, and then that the funds are essentially lent interest-free to the community facility, and then the payments go back into the fund, so it creates a sort of revolving fund, and then they're able to do other projects. They also do, they also have money that's available for energy efficiency up to 20 grand. So they're really just out in the space. They've got a vehicle. They're ready to work with communities, whether they're in urban or regional settings, so that they can start to kick off some projects in their local area. Repower Shoalhaven is now into their 3rd project. So their first one was on top of Bowls Club, and again, this is really the community investment, 20 investor limit. Each project is sub 100 kilowatts, so they're normally about 99 kilowatts. They've done a combination project for the 3rd one, so they got 3 different sites which together made up the 99 kilowatts. But the first 2 were standalone sites, and one, as I said, was the bowling club. That's a little graphic of how it works. And essentially these projects are generally between 7 and 10 years in length in regards to the investment. So people will get their sort of annual dividends and then often a bullet repayment of their investment back at the end of the project. And the bowling club just goes on to owning the solar array. Clear Sky Solar is another really big one. I think they are up to about 11 projects. They're largely active in New South Wales, but they are looking at other states, and I believe they've got a project in Victoria. Again, this sort of after 7 years, the ownership gets transferred to the host site. Really good rates of return with Clear Sky. They're all volunteer run, and they've got a nifty little system that it's based around a trust model, so it's a slightly different version of the others. The Embark model, which we've been working on, so the first project the first project we did was the Lismore City Council one, so we did the business model for those 2 facilities up in Lismore. So one was the wastewater treatment facility and the sports centre, and that essentially worked as a loan, so the community invests money and the community investment vehicle lends the money to the council, and the council then goes ahead and builds a solar array and is responsible for operating and maintaining it. The other version of that we've done for Sydney Renewable Power Company, so that's a 520 kilowatt system, and that's a company structure. It'll have about 400 investors, and it opens up for investment in December this year. Another really good one for you to think about in regards to your local council. So Darabin have done a trial of this, and there's several other local councils around the state that are looking at doing this. And it's essentially using the rates to facilitate low-income households or pensioners to be able to have solar on top of their roofs. It was set up to be cash flow positive. So essentially the council puts the money up, and the solar is installed, and then there's a premium charged on the rates to pay back. But the idea is that the premium charged on the rates is never higher than the solar savings that you would get from your electricity bill. So it's all kind of mapped out so that the pensioners and low-income households are always cash flow positive. I'm assuming you guys all know about the ATA simulator, so it's an awesome tool that has been developed. It's a simulation tool that can help you to sort of map host sites around Australia actually. So they started off just in Victoria and New South Wales, but it's now national. It's a wonderful thing if you do have a little bit of knowledge to be able to work out what sites might be appropriate and what the kind of business model might be around that. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about other resources, free resources that are coming soon. So there is a small-scale solar toolkit, funding and finance toolkit that we've been developing for the past 18 months. It's going to be released on the 4th of October at the All Energy Conference. And essentially it's just a big guidebook full of different case studies, lots of IP about how you build your own project and what sort of contractual items you need and stuff like that. And there'll also at the end of the year be at the second round of New Energy Jobs Fund, so that's another opportunity for communities. And something that I'm noticing at the moment is there's a whole bunch of retailers. I mean, PowerShop already have their operating license, but there's a whole bunch of retailers that are waiting at the moment to get their licenses with the ESC. So one of those is Energy Locals, and both PowerShop and Energy Locals are very focused on working with communities to help them build their own community energy projects. So I think they're going to start to be a lot more active in the space. They've got a lot of they've got the resources to be able to leverage a lot of kind of expertise or funding and finance towards projects, and they can obviously tie it up with customer acquisition and purchasing electricity, so it's a really nice fit for them. So yeah, the two retailers I'd say are starting to really get very active in the community energy space are those two, and that's very exciting. The more organisations in the mix, the better for all of us. So I might leave it there, if that's okay. Yeah, I might leave it there and answer some questions. Yeah.
And if you could say a bit more about the New Energy Jobs Fund.
Sure.
That's my question.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's $20 million in total and spread over 3 rounds. The first round they unlocked, I think, $5.5 million in the end. The next round they're going to do 7. They have a distinct category for community, and that includes councils as well. So the first round, it was capped at $100,000 for community groups, and most of the grants that have been given were around the $50,000 mark, and it was largely around business model development or feasibility studies, so some technical feasibility studies. I don't know what the criteria for community groups is going to be for the next round. They haven't released that, but they've definitely said that they're going to keep that kind of tranche going forward for community groups. What I do know is that they were completely overwhelmed by how many community groups applied. So I think 3/4 of the applications were from community, and they couldn't say yes to all of them. So I think that stimulated the current parliamentary inquiry into community energy, because clearly there's this huge desire out there in the local communities, and there needs to be some sort of financial mechanism which can unlock this. So whether it's through the reverse auctions that they're going to run, or through a community feed-in tariff, that would be 2 mechanisms that they could use, that have been used overseas. So they're getting ready to deliver a financial mechanism for community energy.
So when you say they, you're referring to the state
government.
State government.
Yeah.
I invested in Hepburn Wind 8 years ago.
Yeah.
I never planned to make any money out of it. But one of the reasons was to try and show that it was financially viable. Mm-hmm. After 8 years, there still hasn't been any dividend paid.
Yeah.
Do you think community wind is financially viable, or is Hepburn just got caught out, or what are your feelings on that?
Sure. So we, next week there'll be a member survey going out around how do members want to receive their return going forward, because we are at the end of this financial year going to pay our first return, thank goodness, finally. It has been a long slog.
Christmas.
Yeah, so we, no one could have forecast the type of political and market turmoil that we were exposed to. So a lot of when I, sort of advocate to the state government around having this financial mechanism that can give a secure price to community groups, because otherwise the market and the politics, it's too much risk. Communities won't want to go ahead and build their own projects, because why would you if the federal government could pull the renewable energy target or, pull the carbon price and the market, would completely collapse. So we got very exposed as the pioneering project. I was just giving an example before around, I've just finished our annual report for the year. The all-in price, which is the combined price for what we get for spot electricity as well as LGCs, for this end of financial year was $117, which is back on track. That's what the original forecasts were. Last year it was 67. So we've taken a massive hit on our bottom line. Luckily, the income levels at the moment mean that we can quickly catch up. So we've done a couple of things really well. Our original debt was $3.1 million, and we were scheduled to pay that over a 15-year period. We're now 5.5 years in, and we're down to $600,000. So that's we've been rapidly paying off debt far ahead of schedule, and now we're in a position where we can recoup money and pay back our accumulated losses because the income level's so high. So we're totally back on track, but we also want to think about growing and expanding locally. So solar wind farm, other projects, and to do that we need a no risk scenario so that we can get a secure price going forward. During all the political turmoil, there was only one wind farm built in Victoria. It was called Chepstow. It was a 3-turbine project. It was, it's financially viable. It got a PPA for $120. It's off and flying. So the amounts that we paid to build our wind farm back when we paid them, we could have built 3 turbines for the price of 2 now if we were to build now. For a project like Woodend, who they're looking at 5 turbines, 5 3-megawatt turbines, it totally makes economic sense as well. So that answers the question. We did get caught out. Nobody could have forecast what the political pressures would have been. I think we've done very well to survive in that operating environment where it dropped to, pretty much half price for a couple of years. And we're quickly, sort of back on track and about to make a return. Definitely, I think that the space, if you can get a confirmed price, the space is really open for future wind developments. Also for bioenergy, which can be very, very expensive. That's another one where they'll really need a secure price. Solar already kind of makes sense on lots of levels, but yeah, definitely a no-risk scenario means that lots of communities can just get on and build their own projects.
Do you see that through community investment you'll be able to have a fit as opposed to
the auction or
the industry-controlled abolition of fit? By the way, I think there's a serious other problem there. But so if you've got, say, 100 kilowatts on 20 houses,
yeah,
you'll be able to pay those people a fit.
a feed-in tariff. Who? The government or?
No, you as the operator.
As the operator. Yeah, I mean, some retailers are already doing that. So I know Power Shop has just done a trial, they call it My Neighbourhood Solar up in New South Wales, where they've essentially charged 4 cents on top of, 4 cents a kilowatt on top of the price. That would just be on their standard product, and said, in this local postcode, if you support your neighbour, having solar on their roof, and you want to pay them for doing so, you can essentially create a tariff, and it'll be 4 cents on top of the kilowatt. And then if you're in that local area and you're willing to pay that, then that will bump up the tariff that those people get normally, which is 7 cents. So it'll bump it up to 11 cents. It means that they get more. So there's retailers doing that in the space. In regards to operators, there's lots of complexity around, it's called virtual net metering, or just how the distribution network factors in that for how economically viable it can be. So there was a rule change. It's up at the moment around reduced charges for distribution networks. So for them to get a little bit less if there's lots of local generation going on. I'm doubtful that it'll go through, but there's definitely lots of interest in the space that we should be able to trade energy. Operators should be able to create their own tariffs.
I think that's a way wrong. I mean, there's too many barriers to entry, especially cash barriers to entry.
Yeah, yeah.
Some of in the States, they start trying to do that.
Yeah.
They've just found brick wall after brick wall.
Yeah.
But I was thinking more in a community sector, you could at least theoretically create a microfit system.
Yeah, you can, absolutely.
Where you could say, well, if you 20 people in your community, we can now start planning a microfit, as you say, a micro net metering concept. Rather than the power shop one, which I suspect has other technical issues.
Yeah, but we, with Hepburn Wind, we plug into the grid and we have to sell via a retailer. So for us, so we're not community grid or anything like that. If you, potentially in a community grid, you could look at creating your own tariff structure within it. But we very much plug into the grid.
Yeah, okay.
I'd like to follow up on that because if you've got a microfit, you couldn't do that in Victoria, surely, because the regulations. You hit the brick walls. You might be able to do it in New South Wales, but would it work here?
No, well, you can't in regards to the distribution network. You could theoretically, but the business model wouldn't stack up. It would be paying through the roof to create a microfit. Ideally in the future, I would like to see the government deliver a community fit, and then it's just secure for a 20-year period or something like that. I think that's the sensible approach, or the auction price.
Okay. So I guess related to the two last questions, so more generally, what are the current barriers for the uptake of community energy, community renewable energy projects, and what would be the policies that would be able to enable these projects to deploy?
Yeah, there's so many. Do you want to see the list that I wrote for the parliamentary inquiry? It's like this long, which I can share with you. But look, there's so many mechanisms that could drive it, and there's so many as well that need to be sorted. So, I mentioned before the PILOR, which is the rates issue. There's a discussion paper about at the moment. Hepburn Wind's the only organisation that's exposed to that at the moment, but the reality is that local government rates were built for coal generators, and if you're a small scale operator, you have to pay the same amount. It's a fixed rate. It's $40,000. So that's an incredible fee if you're a solar farm or something like that. So there's all these very micro nuanced things that need to happen. But then on a broader level, those things can be worked out. We really need to have a really high target for community energy. We need a financial mechanism to drive it, and we need support agencies and education programs to ensure that people are engaged and are part of the transition. Some things which we're talking about, like around virtual net metering and the reduced network charges, would be fantastic. Like, they're really taking off in other spaces. That would enable things like solar gardens to just happen and really work. People are really hungry for it. Like, I know out in the Newstead community, they've got a bunch of roofs. They could effectively become 100% renewable if they're allowed to play with the electricity like that. But it's just we're not able to at the moment, but hopefully that'll be unlocked. I think the Victorian government really wants to make it happen, but again, it's a national issue. Yeah.
Rocky Mountain Institute has got a number of big wins.
Yeah.
And most of what they say there is,
You've talked pretty positive about the state government, what they're doing so far. Do you think they're actually serious in what they're doing? Are they?
I guess my concern would be around how long it's taking them to do it, and how long they'll be in power. I think one of the things that they're not thinking seriously enough about is the potential for backlash around a huge amount of renewable energy deployment, especially around wind. With the ACT wind auction that was held recently, it's a lot smaller. They've pretty much taken the cream of projects in the Victorian space. And the projects that will need to be built for us to meet that 40% renewable target in Victoria are going to be projects that, have kind of been stalled for 5 years because there was a lot of, community objections and stuff like that. So how do you reframe all of those projects when there's so much trust that's been lost and the community doesn't see the benefit? The government's got a big role to play in sort of mandating minimal kind of benefit sharing levels and, community engagement, but also on a broader level, going out there to schools and doing education programs. Like they have to play that role as well. They can't expect, the really good people in the advocacy sector, like the Australian Wind Alliance, Friends of the Earth's Yes to Renewables campaign. They've been out there inoculating communities for years, fixing up the space and making projects happen. And it has to be a whole of government approach. Like there has to be a sort of transition education program is my thinking. And I don't think they're serious enough about that and seeing their role in that. But good to see targets being set. I want to see more distinct targets around what community energy gets and also what the Latrobe Valley gets, because I think that's a really good one.
You mentioned before the need to legislate long-term fees or whatever for these sort of projects. Isn't there a risk that any government can just legislate to change them again later anyway? Can you really guarantee a return long-term? Or?
Yeah, with the auction mechanism, you can. So the reverse auction would essentially give a fixed price for 20 years, and they would be legislating it so it couldn't be overturned. So all the projects that we delivered or the contracts that were signed in that time period would be legislated. Yeah. It's not like the renewable energy target where the market price of LGCs can drop out drastically. It's a different kind of mechanism. It would protect against issues like that happening.
Yeah, I'm interested in the 22 projects coming up. Do you know much about them? Do you know, are they mainly wind or are they mainly regional? Are they all over the?
They're all over the place.
It's a real mix.
I don't think there's any wind. Yeah.
It's mainly solar.
Yeah, it's lots of solar, lots of there's some bioenergy in there as well. There's some council-based projects as well as community projects. Yeah.
What's the secret to mobilising the community to fire them up to do this? Is there a formula to get to work on?
Being present, like showing up, I think, in your local community and your local events, and having a group of really committed volunteers who are well regarded in the local community, I think is some key ingredients. But definitely having local presence and start telling the story early and getting people engaged around it. I think there's so many groups which have tried the sort of farmers market stall approach, and it genuinely does work. It sort of just gets people excited. The different approaches that you would try for wind compared to solar are various. The questions that you get are very different for those. But yeah, just being, I think, getting out there, being present, having some key people who can help spread the word, and liaising really well with local government, your network distributor, all those kind of key stakeholders early would be really good.
Is it the sort of thing where you just call a community meeting and invite people along?
I would say start off, depending on the technology, but probably just start off smaller, like just start having, a cup of coffee or a catch up with a few people, But definitely, I guess the process for community energy has been get a core of committed individuals and then do a public kind of forum or meeting. So I've gone along to a bunch of first community energy forums in regional areas and urban areas and stuff, and that's definitely a process. If it was to be a big wind farm development, I wouldn't say have a town hall meeting. I'd say don't do that. Maybe have a listening post inside the town hall for a day and just be available, but don't necessarily call a big forum. Yeah.
Are there companies driving this sort of development? Or are they mainly groups meeting in halls and starting that way?
Yeah, no, heaps of developers are getting into the space, as are the retailers. So, yeah, especially in the solar space, there's a lot of developers that are starting to drive it. I mean, I think it's interesting now that there's, in 2014, 1,500 people working in the renewables sector lost their jobs. And now I reckon probably 1,500 have all started again in the past six months in Victoria. So yeah, there's lots of businesses that are actively, starting up in preparation for this. So, communities can partner with them, commercial projects will get built anyway. I think, it's all part of the mix.
Yeah, it's because the environment, the political changes and everything might have been driving away businesses from doing this.
Definitely, yeah. But they're all sort of coming back to Victoria at the moment, and new ones are popping up, and yeah, it's a very optimistic space.
I think the landfill one out of Alfred is going to change things because he was a better quality control builder who is building a whole development in no longer out of suburbia, or in suburbia, with solar connected right the way through. And that's, I think, will change a lot of market perception, and I think a lot of developer perception of what needs to be done.
Yeah, so that sort of stuff's really exciting. We're starting to see those new housing developments that are integrating solar. There's some battery trials going on at the moment, out in the eastern suburbs. Yeah, microgrids, that kind of stuff.
There's
really
a development just north of Adelaide. It's about 8 k's out, but that's Adelaide. That's the other side of the park, or whatever you call it, the other side of the border. But to have Beverly basically, in a suburbia, building a huge site where every house is going to be solar and have battery and designed around EVs. I suspect very rapidly that just spring demand.
Kind of a change of topic. You mentioned the bioenergy and farmers who are giving their crops to the bioenergy because the canning facility is gone. That really made me step back because when I personally think bioenergy, I tend to think using waste biomaterial for making the energy. Is it really viable for the farmers to grow crops specifically for the primary application of producing bioenergy?
Yeah, especially when you've got a whole range of inputs for the bioenergy facility. So you need to have, certain inflows, so certain amounts of stock that you can basically build a contract around for 10 years, so that you know that there's going to be enough waste, enough beetroots, enough straw to be able to feed the digester and machine. So within the Hepburn Shire, they're looking at a small unit. This is our local council is looking at a unit, and that's only waste energy streams. But definitely when you start to look at the bigger ones, so the one in Cleancarra, they're looking at between 1 megawatts and 12 megawatts, and they're looking at a whole range of inflows, so including waste, but also other crops.
But you've got a fruit farm, big fruit farm, Shepherd, whatever. market demand says I've got to have apples of particular quality or look. You might be exporting X number. So you've got different ranges of cash flows as the fruit grower. You're going to have quite a bit on the ground, and they used to let that rot. That was where the danger of fruit fly was. You can now start collecting that and putting it into a biodigester, which you can now run. First of all, the byproduct is fertiliser.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you can put it back on your farm. And
fertiliser.
second thing, you can run your cool stores from the energy. Isn't there one going up in Ballarat or something?
There's already one at the hospital near Ballarat.
Yeah.
It's quite small. It's about 200 kilowatts,
Yeah.
and it's largely, waste from the hospital as well as the nearby treatment facility. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
already up.
Yeah, I haven't seen the latest
Both
report.
at
Both.
hospital. Yeah, both at hospital. Yeah. Yeah, so that kind of unit is really replicable and
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, and already proven. So I think when communities can see, like with what you were talking about with the residential development, once there's examples in the space, it becomes really easy for people to understand how they can be relevant for their local areas as well.
Well, I suspect for country community.
Still, that's, often community energy projects aren't of that scale. I mean, Hepburn Wind was, but generally the kind of solar projects that communities are looking at, they're more like the 1 to 2 megawatt scale. So having a fund that began a lot lower, sort of 500,000, would be really, really useful for the community energy sector. So that's something we definitely advocate for. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the wash-up of Arena now that some of their funding's been removed and stuff like that. But definitely having access to, low interest, smaller amounts of money that are designated for renewables development would be a very good thing for the sector.
I noticed none of those big projects are in Victoria.
In Victoria,
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
Maybe next round if there is one.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you persuade people to get going on something like this when they could just put solar panels on their house themselves?
Oh yeah.
And why should they go to the trouble of organising people in the community to do it?
Totally. So I think Clear Sky Solar, who I mentioned earlier, who have about 11 projects up in New South Wales, I think they've said that maybe 80% of the host sites that they talk to about solar then just go on to do it themselves. And maybe about 20 are happy to go through a process. They don't mind that. They're happy that they've brought awareness to the site, that the business owner wants to go ahead and do solar, like it's a win anyway. For small scale solar, you have to work with a group that really gets it. So for the Lismore City Council, it was a way for them to access money so they could meet their mandate of 100% renewable energy without having to fork out all the money themselves, and they could deliver the rest of it. So it has to work, has to have mutual kind of gains for both the community group as well as the host site. Obviously, when you're talking about bigger projects like a wind project, it means that you can, leverage, lots of community income to be able to deliver a project of that scale. So it's a different kind of, proposition.
So when you say there's a mandate, it's coming from the council. Was it? Oh.
Yeah. So Lismore City Council set a 100% renewable energy target by 2020.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but always remember who Lismore are. They've got 3rd generation hippies living in that area. Them and Byron, between them, the original hippies that we all went out through our first years of university, which are all living there.
Yeah.
And
Because we've got increasing numbers of people living in apartments and they haven't got a roof. They're living solar on themselves, so I guess they can always buy into any community project. Can't they?
Yeah, exactly. So it's gives access for renters or other people to be able to participate.
What about microgrid between households in the street?
Yeah, awesome. Great idea. They're trialling one at the moment. So SP AusNet has just done a trial. I think they did 16. No, there was 16 houses in a court. I found this really interesting actually. 16 houses in a court. they offered all of them free solar and batteries to participate in the microgrid trial, and only 12 of the houses took up the offer of free solar and batteries.
Really?
Was this the one at Mooraba?
Yeah, Mobilising, exactly. So, you know, even when it's free and on the table, still some people aren't there yet and don't want to participate like that. But certainly, so AusNet has led in that space. There's a whole bunch of organisations that are really getting into developing the demand management software to be able to navigate, you know, the community grid, microgrid spaces. And I know that definitely for a bunch of communities that are edge of grid already. So, you know, communities like Malakuta, which are up, you know, they're sort of at the end of a line. They have a lot of grid issues around the bushfire season or high tourism areas. For communities like that, it makes total sense right now to put a microgrid in there. And there's a bunch of others, you know, around the state that should be doing that. I have a lot of people come up to me in our community because they're like, we want a microgrid with the wind farm, you know, and it's like, well, it's a nice idea, but when we're not edge of grid, and if we make a community microgrid, there's going to be access issues and equity issues for everyone else who, you know, would normally get the electricity passing through our sort of channels. So that's not us, but definitely there's other communities like Newstead that aren't too far away that those conditions are a match for.
What's the biggest impediment at the moment? Is it power companies or the legislative assembly, political issues?
Look, I think power companies, as soon as the state government started exerting a lot of pressure on them, power companies really changed focus. They were holding on to this idea that their core business was never going to be batteries and they were never going to have to participate in batteries, and they very rapidly changed and are now, you know, they want to keep people on the grid. So they want to participate in the battery market, they want to participate in helping communities be virtually in their own microgrid but still connected. I think the barriers are being removed, and I think the network distributors are active in that space. They want to do it. They're talking to lots of community groups about how to make it happen.
So we as electors should lobby our Member of Parliament, you mean?
Sorry?
We as electors should lobby our Member of Parliament.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think it's happening in the space already, and I think it makes a lot of business sense in so many communities. I think the issues are going to be around, you know, lots of communities want to be off-grid, like have their own completely separate microgrid, but it's an essential service. It's too difficult to do that. You know, the smart thing is to be kind of able to disconnect, you know, and be in your own microgrid but connected to the, you know, to the wires essentially. And I think that's what the network distributors are starting to kind of fight for.
And realise they have to.
They have to participate in it, or it's going to happen without them, and then there's going to be ownership issues and, you know, operational issues of who manages all these tiny little microgrids. Yeah.
If all this develops, then what, or how do we close down Hazelwood?
Make it redundant.
I mean, I think in regards to getting to the 40% renewable target by 2025, Hazelwood's going to have to be shut down in that period. So I think it was scheduled to be shut down by 2032, and then the rest of them, so Loy Yang B will be the last one to be shut off out of the 4, and that's scheduled for 2048. But Hazelwood is clearly going to be shut down much earlier because you can't get to 40% renewable without reducing some of the electricity that's in the market. If not closed, ramped down significantly. I would say closed because it's the oldest one. But yeah, I mean, I think what's been happening in South Australia in regards to the kind of backlash against renewables and the gas, you know, the gas market and stuff like that is going to be interesting here. The transformation that's going to have to happen to even just the poles and wires and, you know, augmenting the lines to be able to hold electricity in different areas is going to be huge. So it's a whole of system transformation here. It's not just an option to build a 200 megawatt wind farm. It's a much, much more, you know, complex operation.
I'd like to come back to a small question, having had these big ones. The the slide is still up, you were talking about retailers, Power Shop and Energy Local. Power Shop has a license and there are others waiting for a license.
Yeah.
What kind of a license and is it applicable in Victoria?
So it's a energy retailer's license, totally applicable. It's just a long process to get one.
They would be the licensee.
Yeah. No. So they would hold the license, and because of that, they would be able to retail electricity on a large scale.
Like Red Energy? for
Yeah,
instance.
like Red Energy, like Power Shop. It's just Energy Locals is a social enterprise, so it's a bit of a different model. They're not necessarily for profit.
I think I read somewhere, and I think it was Power Shop, that they estimate it cost them about 40 mil to set up
Yeah.
as a retailer. There's insurance issues, there's a whole pile of issues. It's not a cheap
No.
exercise.
So-
It's one of the impediments, they say.
So Anova set up in the northern New South Wales. It's a
That was
community
where
owned
I think I read it. Yeah.
community-owned retailer. They set up for, I think, $7 million.
Yeah.
But it's not viable really until you hit the 20,000 customer mark. So you have to ramp up really quickly to get to your 20,000 mark.
That was one of Byron.
In Byron, yeah.
And they had, and again, they had the 3 generations of hippies there running the whole place, so that made a big difference. But I think...
They don't do much electricity, but
Yes, it was. They had bio-energy electricity, they smoked it.
And it's one thing to capital raise to set up
That's
the
right.
organisation. It's another thing to manage the risk and the ongoing operations of it for its,
And what
life
they
cycle.
did, I think they got a lot of it in kind by voluntary work
Heaps.
as well.
Yeah.
But I think it was Power Shop. I read, somebody did the numbers and they said it's about 40 mil. There's quite a few bonds that you have to put down with AEMO, all that sort of thing. So it's not, it's all for the small players.
What are Power Shop actually doing?
in regards to
You mean in regard to community
community energy,
energy?
yeah. The My Neighbourhood Solar project that I talked about before, which they've trialled. They're just about to trial another one at the start of October. It's called My Community Energy, which will be kind of a bit of another fundraising one, but for community energy distinctly.
Yep.
They're talking to a range of generators as well, future generators, about how to build projects. So they're actively working with communities, which is really good, really positive. Yeah.
Is Red Energy doing anything in the area? It seems to go very quiet.
No, it's gone very quiet. I was saying that we have been with Red Energy for 5.5 years, and we've just finished our contract with them and are switching providers, which we'll announce who it is in a couple of weeks. But essentially they bought Lumo, so they bought a linter, they bought a coal-fired power plant, and they've got, I think, 300,000 customers, so they're huge. They're just a huge sort of organisation now, and I think their original intent when we started negotiating with them about wanting to be in the community energy space, those people are long gone, and that kind of focus isn't really a priority for them. They're very much out of that space now.
the we in this context is
Hepburn Wind, sorry.
What about Snowy? Hydro?
Snowy
Oh, yeah.
owns Red.
Oh, Snowy owns Red, right.
Yeah.
Are there any solar thermal players in the States?
Yeah.
CSP?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening in Adelaide with that, and there's also a project that was going to get up in New South Wales that got halted, but I've heard that it's looking like it's going to go ahead again. So yeah, because I think there's three potential projects at different scales. None of them in Victoria, but two in Adelaide and New South Wales.
What innovative new ideas have you been hearing from overseas, like for instance under the road systems in Germany that you're talking about, where cars drive over a circle and create potential?
I I don't know. You know what I think I was in Germany for a month in July.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
You?
It's so funny. Funny you should say that. And I think I'm not even so inspired by the innovative stuff. I'm really inspired by the stuff that we could just be doing already here, you know, and how normal it is over there. And when you sort of look around, you're like, EV charging stations, solar, even though it's so cloudy everywhere, wind turbines next to a train track, you know, like that kind of stuff. I'm just like, it's so nice to have what's normal reset given the Australian context, and kind of be able to come back here and be like, oh no, that's normal. We'll just head towards normal, you know, and make it happen here. So I think, I love the innovative stuff. I think it's really interesting, but I'm more interested about how do we just get as much as what's already proved on the ground and operating as quickly as possible.
There's probably a few others like wind and tidal and others that are serious power if you can get onto it.
Yeah.
That can work in the right locations. Is anyone doing that overseas?
Yeah, and I mean there's a 1 megawatt trial happening off the coast of Warrnambool with tidal power. There's one in WA, but in just off Cornwall and also off the Netherlands, there's 2 large scale tidal projects.
Stuff.
They're not community, no, they're all sort of in the R&D space still at the moment, so they're very expensive, but yeah, equally as
But
exciting.
if you can get onto it, it's gigawatts with tidal, megawatts, it's serious power.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's a pretty severe environment.
But it's a tough environment.
Tough
It's a
environment, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, technically, it's hard. The thing that happened to Carnegie Wave in the Union was, I think, shocked everyone. That, you know, you had an exceptionally strong underwater current and ripped the whole thing up.
Yeah, and I think even I've had a chat with the crew down in Warrnambool, and the hardware that they're using under the water, they haven't done any testing to see what happens in, you know, that kind of saltwater environment, and so it's degrading really, really, really quickly. They don't really have an answer for that, so they're sort of like, we know it's only going to last a couple of years, but we want to see how it works. We're not worried about the fabric, but you know, that's pretty experimental.
I have a friend who's got a lease up in Torres Strait. He can generate enough power for Thursday Island and tidal desal as well.
Yeah.
There's incredible tidal flow through there.
Awesome.
So he's on it. But it's tough stuff.
Your last chance is coming up. Well, I think it's time to say thank you to Taryn in the appropriate fashion.